So, good afternoon, everyone. So, myself, Aryan Sharma, and today we learn about ARP spoofing. So, for ARP spoofing, first we should know what is ARP. So, basically, ARP is designed to discover MAC addresses and then map them into the IP addresses. And basically, ARP is a communication protocol used to find MAC addresses. And it was firstly developed in 1980s for networks to manage connections. So practically, we can say like if there are four hosts in the system, like A, B, C, and D, and host A wants to find the MAC address of host D, but host A doesn't know the MAC address of host D, so he wants to find the MAC address of host D, and he have the list of IP addresses. So host A will just broadcast the IP address into the whole system, and other host will reply that if that their IP matches or not. Like for instance, we can say that host B replies that it's not its IP address. Host C also replies that it's not its IP address, and the remaining host is host D. Host D will reply that it's his MAC address, and in the return command, it will just return that it's his IP address with his MAC address in the return request. My MAC address would be there. So this was our ARP request and reply between the host. So like in future, if A wants to communicate with host D, so it will not again broadcast that whole IP in the whole system because ARP has already got the MAC address of host D. So it will just like when host A gets the request from host D that it says ID, IP address and returns its MAC address, then that values are stored in ARP cache table. So in future communication of host A with host D, it will just communicate using ARP cache table. In using ARP cache table, it will just check its IP and MAC address, and and then communication will be easy between host A and host D. So in this order, ARP request and replies. So now we will perform ARP spoofing practically. Firstly, we need to open our Windows PowerShell, and we would run it as an administrator because some commands doesn't run a user account, so we have to run it as an administrator. Firstly, we'll see our default gateway. To see default gateway, ipconfig command is used. Now we can see our default gateway is 172.3.1.144.2. And to see its MAC address, arp-a command is used. That is used to see the ARP cache. Now we can see this is our default gateway and its MAC address. Now we'll perform the ARP spoofing using Linux. And this is our Linux, and we will open the terminal first and see its IP address and MAC address. And in Linux, ifconfig is used. Now we can see this is our IP address and this is our MAC address. So to do the ARP spoofing, firstly we'll open sniffing and spoofing, and in this ettercrab graphical password. Firstly, we'll set the primary interface which is ETH0. So now we'll take that. Now we'll scan for the host first. Scanning has started. Scanning has been done. 3 hosts has been added. So now we can see the host list. Now these three are in the host list. So now first we'll add this to the target one, and we'll add second host to the target two. Now we can start the ARP spoofing and poisoning, that is one and the same thing. Now we can see ARP poisoning victims are this group 1 and group 2, and ARP poisoning has been started. Now we can see this in Wireshark. So this is a Wireshark, and we'll start capturing the network packets. Capturing has been started. Let it capture. We can also see the capturing in normal windows. We can see the network packets in both Wireshark. Maybe it's Linux Wireshark or Windows Wireshark. We can start the capturing here also. We can see that ARP. So till then, let us check the network packets in Linux and Wireshark. This is a Wireshark. Let it stop, and we can filter it using writing ARP. We can see the ARP cache packets. So these all are ARP packets. Now, if we want to see its MAC address, ARP. Now we can see here that sender IP address is this and MAC address is this. So now we can see that ARP spoofing has been done. So now in this way, ARP spoofing is done using Linux, using ettercap, and we have to basically add two targets when we scan the host. Two targets are then added to host list, and then ARP poisoning is done.
Now let's discuss about ARP header format. First is hardware type. This field is of 16-bit. This field defines the network type that the local network needs to transmit the ARP message. Hardware type can be any, like Ethernet, IEEE 802 networks. By default value of the Ethernet is type 1. Second, protocol type. The protocol type is a 16-bit field used to specify the type of a protocol, whether using IPv4 or IPv6. Hardware length. The size of the hardware length field is 8-bit. This field specifies a length of physical address in bytes. By default, the address of length is 6 bytes. Protocol length. This defines the 8 this length is of 8-bit long. It defines the length of the IP address in bytes, like IPv4 has length of 4 and IPv6 has length 6. ARP operation. It is a 16-bit field that determines the type of ARP packet. There are two types of packet in ARP: ARP request and ARP reply. ARP request has operation code 1 and ARP reply has operation code 2. Sender hardware address specifies the physical address of the sender. Sender protocol address determines the logical address of the sender. Target hardware address determines the physical address of the target. If we don't know the address of the target, then it is written in a zeros or in FF, that is a broadcast message. Target protocol address specifies the logical address of the target. So this is about the ARP header format. Now before discussing about ARP spoofing, some of the key terminologies are IP address, MAC address, and spoofing. IP address stands for Internet Protocol Address. It is a numerical label that is 192.0.2.1 that is connected to a computer network, uses the Internet Protocol communication. It is a 32-bit integer address. It mainly performs two main functions: network interface identification, location addressing. It is a unique address that identifies a device on the internet or a local network. Second, MAC address. It stands for Media Access Control. It is a hardware identifier that uniquely identifies each device on a network. Primarily, the MAC address is being assigned by the manufacturers. They are often found on device network interface controller card. Only key difference between IP address and MAC address is MAC address are permanent as they do not change their own as provided by the manufacturer, but IP addresses are dynamic as they change periodically based on time. Third, spoofing. Some false practices are performed to steal the informations. There are mainly three types of false practices: DOS attack, session hijacking, and man-in-the-middle attack. In denial of service attack, a cyber hacker tries to disrupt the service or host connection to make your site or resources unavailable to their intended audience. The attacker will usually use one computer and internet connection to overwhelm and flood a victim system so that they can access their data. In session hijacking, attacks can use ARP spoofing to steal a session ID and open the door to your private data. That is why using a public Wi-Fi in cafes or busy airports can create a vulnerable situation for your data. In man-in-the-middle attack, use ARP spoofing to intercept incoming traffic from a legitimate user and modify it to gain access to the session. ARP spoofing. If victim and a hacker is in the same Wi-Fi network, then the hacker can see whatever the victim is doing online. Hacker can see all the packets sending and receiving from specific IP. Hacker can see where you are visiting, the username and passwords you are typing. Also called man-in-the-middle attack. Now in this example, if we want to search Google, victim wants to search the Google. Then victim will send his IP address and MAC address to the router, and router will further send IP address and MAC address to internet, and internet will send the IP and MAC address of the Google to the router, and router will send the MAC address to the victim as a reply. So this is a normal routing. And what happens in ARP spoofing? If the victim wants to search Google, then all his IP address and MAC address will firstly goes to hacker. Hacker will receive MAC address and IP address of the victim. The device will be connected, and then the hacker will further send the message to router, and router will send to internet. Then while he send reply from internet, then the message will go to internet, from internet to router, and router will send message to hacker. When the hacker will receive the message, then the hacker will forward this message to victim. But victim will think that this message came from internet, it is safe, but it's not safe. So this is ARP spoofing, as it acts as a man-in-the-middle attack. So in this way, man-in-the-middle attack works. Now steps for performing ARP spoofing. The attacker will gain access through the internet. While gaining access to the internet, the attacker will use some spoofing tools. After that, a fake ARP response convinces both the devices the MAC address of the attacker system is right one, and thereby both devices end up connecting safely. Once the devices are connected, ARP cache entries are updated for all future communications. The hacker can attack after any. So in this way, ARP spoofing is done. Now preventions. Use virtual private networks. Use some detection tools like XARP, Wireshark, KNet cable. There should be use of HTTPS protocols in websites that are safe. Use some static ARP like Cisco routers can help examine the ARP information to monitor whether or not an ARP spoofing event is occurring. So these are the basic preventions from ARP spoofing attack.